Hey, what's going on everyone? In this video, we're going to be talking about the Moondrop S8. So this is an 8 balanced armature earphone per side, so 16 drivers total. And yeah, we're going to be talking about the build, cable, and fit. So the build quality is pretty excellent on these. It's very, very light. For 8 drivers, I would say it's exceedingly light. It doesn't weigh you down. It has good build quality. These are medical grade resin shells. And I'm pretty sure these are handmade individually. So they definitely took their time to do this. And it does take some effort to do. So yeah, that's the overview. Now let's talk about the cable. So the cable is really good. No issues. Very supple and light. And the fit, again, I would say it's amazing because it's not heavy. This fits better than the Blessing 2 that I reviewed a while back. So yeah, overall, really well thought out IEM. I had no issues with anything in terms of the ergonomics. I thought it was pretty spot on. So yeah, let's talk about the sound now. So before we get into the sections of the sound, I'm just gonna point out a few things. So this is a Harman tuned IEM with some changes in the lower mid-range and upper treble. So if you don't like that lower mid-range scoop, which makes everything sound overly thin, then I would say this is better because the lower mid-range is more filled in. And there are a few dips in the treble around 8K, I believe, 7 or 8K. So yeah, that's what I thought. And then the sound on these, it's very, I would say, kind of analytical and fast and speedy. In terms of the quickness of the sound, it's a very speedy IEM. The bass just comes and goes. The mid-range is just screaming at you, and then the treble has a very smooth top end. So yeah, that's the overview. So yeah, let's start off with the bass. So this isn't a bass head IEM, and if you want bass in your songs, this isn't gonna cut it because the BA timbre is quite noticeable on these because it goes all the way low, but it's very fast. So it doesn't decay like a dynamic driver. Instead, it goes for that speedy hit, go, hit, go. So it's very, very fast. I would say there is a slight bit of BA timbre in the bass because it's not textured as well as some other pairs. So that's what I thought about the bass. So if you listen to a lot of tracks like hip-hop, rap, or maybe rock, EDM, metal, you probably won't get the right amount of bass you're looking for. So if you are into the bouncy feeling that I usually talk about, this is not gonna get you there. This leans more on the definition side of things. So I do wish the bass was textured a little better. Because on certain tracks, it seems a little poofy where it just goes like, hits quick and then disappears. So yeah, that leads itself to have a more faster sound, very, very snappy and quick. So I would say the weakest point of this IEM is probably the bass. So yeah, that's the bass. Now let's talk about the mid-range. So if you listen to tracks that have a more shoutier vocal, for some people it might come off as shouty, but for me, I didn't really get that much shout or anything. The mid-range overall has a very smooth texture. I never found it to be really fatiguing. Voices sound very organic, natural, realistic. And out of all the other IEMs I heard, so when a vocalist, when they're screaming into the microphone, this portrayed it in a really nice manner, because you could hear the up and down swings of the voices, which a lot of IEMs don't do. I probably heard 3 to 5 IEMs that do that. When someone's screaming into the microphone, the shift in their voices, this did an excellent job. You hear a lot of detail in the voices. And now on to like the separation side of things. So in terms of the instrument layers, I do think it does a decent job. Not excellent, but pretty decent. So you do hear the layers of everything pretty well. It's very detailed, but it's never harsh or sharp. The mid-range, overall, it just sounds pretty amazing. And you could definitely tell that the drivers they're using in here are pretty high quality, because there's no sense of graininess or texture issues. I never noticed any issues like that. So overall, I do think it's a really good IEM. So if you listen to tracks like that aren't recorded that perfectly, this IEM, it could sound a little too much at times, like too forward. But in general, this IEM has a more forward, intimate presentation. So yeah, that's what I thought about the mid-range. The tonality of the mid-range, I don't think it's perfect, but it's pretty close, but not perfect. Like the C Audio Yume I always talk about has like that perfect arc in the mid-range, and then it tapers off. So the S8 isn't quite up there with the C Audio Yume in terms of that perfect tonality, but it's pretty close. So yeah, that's the mid-range. So now let's talk about the treble. So the treble is pretty airy. I do wish it had a little bit more treble air at certain times when people are singing and when instruments are playing, because if it had a little bit more treble extension, you'll hear the layers better. Yeah, but other than that, so if you get fatigued easily by too much treble, I think this is a good option. So the variations, on the other hand, which I usually talk about, that has a more forward treble, a little more emphasized. And I do prefer the treble on the variations because it's more airy. But I'm not sure if it's smoother, but I do think this IEM is smoother than the variations in terms of the treble. So if you get fatigued easily, or you're not into those sharp sounds, I think this is a good IEM for that. So yeah, the overall characteristic of the treble, it comes up when it needs to. It's not really boosted. This IEM didn't really sound V-shaped to me. Even though the mid-range is slightly thin, it sounds like maybe like ever so slightly V-shaped because of the thin mid-range. But most people won't notice that, and I think a lot of people would probably think this is neutral with bass boost, or just neutral. So yeah, that's what I thought about the treble. Now where I do have some issues is with the soundstage and imaging, because the soundstage reminds me of the Blessing 2, where it's really close to your ear because of the forward sound. So where everything is placed is going to be a little outside your head. It doesn't extend like this far or this far even. It's like this far in your head. So overall, I do wish the soundstage was a little wider. Everything was more spread out. Because sometimes where everything is placed, like the positional cues, it can get messed up. And then another gripe I had, not relating to the soundstage, is there's some resonance going on. I'm not sure if one of the drivers is firing when it shouldn't be. Because when you listen to a voice, on certain tracks I notice this, when you listen to a voice, when it's happening here, it kind of reverberates like this. So it does have some resonance issues. And normally I don't talk about this, but this IEM does have that. So on some vocal tracks I notice when the singer's singing, it spreads out to the left and right, like that echoey, reverby effect. So I don't think that's actually a part of the music. So I do wish that wasn't there, because I've heard cheaper sets that don't have that. But maybe they did that for a reason, or that was their goal. I'm not sure. But I don't think that was their intention. Maybe it just happened. So because of that, it does have some coherency issues, because the bass, you could definitely tell when that bass comes in, because it doesn't align with the rest of the frequencies. And then that mid-range for the voices does have that reverb effect, but that's not actually a part of my music. And I've heard a bunch of IEMs, so I know exactly what should be in my song. So yeah, this did have that voice reverb, but I think it's harder for IEMs to do the instrument reverb and that overall general reverb. So maybe they took a slightly cheaper route and just put the voice reverb in, or maybe they didn't even know that they caused this issue. But I don't think anyone pointed this out except me. So that's interesting. And then the imaging, it does slightly suffer because the soundstage is so close to you. So everything could get a little claustrophobic at times, and it's hard to pinpoint where everything is in the mix. So I did notice that. So I do wish the imaging and soundstage were better, but I don't really have any issues with the mid-range or treble other than those few things I mentioned. And then quickly, I'm going to just say what I think about the details. So in terms of the detail retrieval, I think it's like, oh, maybe a little more than an A grade. Maybe slightly better than the variations. But they're pretty close. So yeah, overall, that's what I thought. So now let's make a quick comparison with the benchmark, the IEM9. So the IEM9 is going to have a warmer tonality in the mid-range. Since I'm talking about the mid-range, let me just finish that. So the mid-range on the IEM9 is warmer, but somehow the instrument separation and layering is much better. I know exactly where everything is placed. Sounds come from like everywhere. Where on this, it seems a little more like compressed, where everything's not as free-flowing where it ought to be. And now let's talk about the bass, then we'll go into the treble. So the IEM9 is one of the most coherent IEMs I've ever heard. The bass fits perfectly with the mid-range and treble to the point where I don't even notice the bass. Like, it's so coherent, the IEM9. Where on the S8, you could tell when that bass kicks in. So it does have some coherency issues. And then the M9's bass, it's just textured better. Some people might even mistaken the M9's bass as a dynamic driver, because it's really close to a dynamic driver, where the S8, the bass isn't really close to a dynamic driver. And then now let's talk about the treble. So somehow the IEM9 has like a warmer tilt to it, but the treble air is extremely clear. So when you listen to high-pitched instruments like a trumpet, a flute, the IEM9 has like this glistening, beaming characteristic to it. Like, it's so well textured. One of the best IEMs I've ever heard for treble air. It has like this twinkly sparkle effect to it, which I haven't really heard on any other IEM. And then the S8's treble, it's airy, but it's not as airy as the M9. So when you listen to voices and stuff, you get the inflections better on the M9. When you listen to instruments, the S8 is still really, really good, but it lacks that finesse and character that the IER M9 has. So overall, I would say the S8 is a really good IEM, but if you want a lot of bass, then I would stay away from it. And then if you want a wide soundstage and not intimate, that is one thing to know also, because it doesn't have the best soundstage. Everything is kind of close together. Where the IER M9, everything is spread out a good amount. So yeah, that's what I thought. Overall, it's a pretty good IEM. I do think the variation is pretty close to it, but the variation sounds more thin, and this has a little bit more of a body to the sound. So I guess it just depends on your preference. At that point, if you want more thinness, get the variation. If you want a little bit more body, the S8 has more body. So yeah, hopefully you guys found this helpful, and have a great day. I'll see you guys in the next one.